Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're so grateful you're here to join us for our Wisdom of the Mystic show. And I'm Reverend Kathy Mastroianni, Executive Director of the Science of Mind Archives.
And I'm Laura Topper. Welcome, everybody. It's so great to be here. We are coming to you through New Thought Media Network, this incredible focus ministry that brings so many programs and broadcasts and teachings to remind us of the truth of who we are. That's what we're doing right now. And today is no exception. We have an incredible super guest on. I'm really excited. Are you excited, Reverend Kathy?
I'm totally excited. I love learning more about our New Thought roots, and this is truly a major root in our New Thought history. So who is coming? So who is
Absolutely.
here today? Who is here?
So we have on the very incredible person who I know because she's been onto the Cosmic Prayer before, Dr. Reverend Petra Weldes. Somebody that is just so wise and knowing and understands and lives by this philosophy, this new thought, religious science of mind philosophy that I know is her life. Dr. Petra is the co-spiritual director of Dallas Center for Spiritual Living, and she will be introducing Phineas Parkhurst Quimby. So, without any further ado, I'm going to add in Dr. Petra to the stream and welcome her to Wisdom of the Mystics. Welcome, Dr. Petra.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you for being here and for completing this international 1 hour that we have together around the globe to talk about Phineas Parkhurst Quimby.
Mm-hmm. So you want me to introduce him a little bit?
Yeah, that would be good if you could, please.
All right.
Let's begin with Phineas.
So Phineas Parkhurst Quimby is, for many people, one of the founders of New Thought. And he really is the founder of the mental science part of New Thought. So he comes out of Maine, he comes out of New England, as so many of our original folks do. And born and raised in Maine. He lived in Belfast. He became a clockmaker. He was very inventive. He has patents, and he was also into photography. He was a super self-educated man, which is also really interesting, like Ernest Holmes and other people. In Maine, the education was really small, very limited. So self-read, self-educated. And he's credited with being the founder of New Thought in many ways because he became a healer out of the principles and the teachings of what he called Christian Science, the science of healing through the teachings of Jesus. And he explored that. He developed his own understanding of that. And in the last 20 years of his life, he literally had a healing practice in Portland, Maine, 12,000 documented patients and healings in that 20-year period. I can tell you a little bit about him. you can see his picture there. There's another picture of him that's often shown. He's older, he's got a white beard, and he's very, stoic looking. And in some respects was a typical New Englander, in that he was a super independent thinker. He really battled with being called a charlatan and fraud. Like, remember all the snake oil people who went around and said, and what was it, shoe polish and alcohol from the back, from the back 40. And so there was a lot of that. There was a lot of need for healing because, of course, medicine was very nascent. And so he battled with that, and he didn't care. He didn't care. He didn't care that it was not considered Christian. He didn't care that, and when he said he didn't believe in God, that put everybody up in arms, and that he was vilified because he believed that people could be healed. And he spent his entire life, well, I would say he would spent the last 40 or 50 years of his life really seeking to learn and understand that, and then to practice it. And there are many, many documented healings, including some of other people that we think of as part of the New Thought lineage, the Dressers, Warren Felt Evans, and of course, Mary Baker Eddy. And so, so there's one woman who became one of his secretaries. She talks about her own healing, and one of the Mrs. Ware, and she talks about her own healing, and all she talks about is how mad Phineas Parkhurst Quimby made her, because he was constantly pushing on, what do you believe? What do you believe? No, I'm telling you, this is the nature of reality. This disease is only it's not a spiritual entity. It has no power of its own. If you will understand the nature of reality, this disease does not have to have hold of you. And it would just infuriate her. Wow. Because she was essentially crippled. She had a chronic issue. New Thought is especially good with healing chronic issues. Yes, of course, you go to the doctor if you break your leg, or, surgery and all that stuff is powerful. Antibiotics are great. But when there's chronic things that nobody seems to be able to take care of, and she talks about how he would infuriate his patients because they didn't want to hear it. And yet he was also described as being so compassionate, so friendly, so caring. And you can read in his letters, yes, madam, I understand that you just want me to promise you that I will cure you. And if you will, and then he goes on to talk about the nature of reality. If you will contemplate this, and this, I cannot promise your healing, but you can promise your own healing. And I mean, it's really quite amazing. So, you have this really strong personality. He was very independent. I'm going to do this. I don't care what you all think of me. And then to really, really be willing to kind of push his patients to an entirely different way of experiencing reality, but then having this really compassionate and friendly demeanor that some of the people that he healed, became his greatest fans and advocates after they had that experience. And it's just it's an interesting dichotomy, and to think about the amount of self-awareness and commitment to, by God, understand this and apply it regardless of any support. A lot of people who find themselves in New Thought find themselves sometimes in that position with their families, in a culture that maybe, has a different viewpoint. And just even for that alone, he's an amazing figure. And then his healings are amazing. So there you go. Just a brief little introduction to Phineas Parkhurst Quimby.
Oh, this is exciting.
I can say much more, but
you
I
have
thought
a question, Reverend Kathy.
Get a word in edgewise.
Yeah.
But I love how you described him. So we got to feel who he was, as a person and what he was up against in his culture and society, but how he was so true to his beliefs, from what he discovered, so he had that clarity and that light, the mystic, right? Is the mystical, because when we tap into the mystic, it's pure spirit.
Okay, so I would tell you that he would not consider himself a mystic. Actually, I think he would find himself appalled to be on a show called The Wisdom of the Mystics, because he didn't believe in God. This is scientific. It is spiritual science.
Nice.
And so I don't disagree with you, Reverend Kathy, at all, that we would consider him a mystic, but he would not. So he was diagnosed with tuberculosis, which at the time, of course, was called consumption. And he actually had these amazing experiences when he would ride home. As a young man, he would ride home on his horse or in his horse and carriage, and he would overcome, and he used this term a lot, he would become excited. He would be filled with excitement, which he really meant as not like we think of it, oh, I'm so excited, I'm gonna, go to a party, but like we might use the term activated, like powerfully activated. And so he would gallop his horse home, or he would gallop his horse and carriage home, and he would discover that he would feel so much better. And over a short period of time, he cured himself of tuberculosis. And so he was fascinated by that experience. What was it about all of that? And how was that possible? Right. And so at the same time, what was happening, of course, is that we had the advent of mesmerism from France. And they started to do all of these demonstrations. Right. This is very, very early psychology. Psychology is barely on the forefront, but mesmerism, which of course eventually became hypnotism, was breaking on, and people would do demonstrations, and they would go around and they would, hypnotize people and make them cluck like a chicken, or, do strong feats and things like that. And he was really, really became very interested in this because his experience of healing had nothing to do with anything but his own inner experience, right? He hadn't taken a pill or done anything. He became really fascinated by that. So he really started studying that. And so then he began practicing this with people and try to, and had more or less success until he found a young man named Lucius. And I can look up his last name if you feel the need to have it. Lucius turned out to be a very, some people are more easily hypnotized than others, right? He became somehow they were really able to connect. And of course, what does hypnotism and mesmerism do? But it was the great discovery, Ernest Holmes calls it the greatest discovery in the science of mind, that we have these two states of consciousness, right? We have our conscious state, and then we have this, what is called in psychology, the subconscious state. And mesmerism moves the conscious state away and allows the subconscious to be revealed. And then, of course, the person who's doing the hypnotizing or the mesmerism takes the place of the conscious mind and directs it. And then the subconscious mind does whatever has been directed, right? That was like this massive revelation, that there was this thing going on to, be in the background, and that it was what was actually handling things and could make your body strong. And so he began to do the same thing. He would go around and he would, for lack of a better word, put on a show. He would put on a show of this experience. But what he discovered was that the young man, Lucius, when he was in a mesmerized state, would somehow spontaneously begin to talk about somebody who was either on the platform and in the audience who had an ailment, and would diagnose the ailment and then would provide a cure. And he was like, how does that work? And, and they, with more or less success. And that there was some credible, demonstrable that this was actually true, that there was this people were having these experiences, and they were in fact then having healings or cures, or at least feeling better by what was being told. And over time in all of this, Quimby began to experiment with not needing this intermediary. Could he himself actually experience that? And he ultimately realized that we can be, in science of mind, we call it the universal subjective mind. We can be so sensitive to that underlying field that he found that he himself, he didn't need to be hypnotized, he didn't need to be mesmerized, and he didn't need an intermediary. That he could sit with someone and he could intuit what was going on. But he realized that he was intuiting cures that had nothing to do with pharmacology, or he was in that the cures, especially because so many of these were chronic challenges, the cures all had to do with underlying traumatic false beliefs, for everything from, well, you're a woman and you're just hysterical, to really truthfully traumatic experiences, to simply the acceptance that disease exists. I've been exposed to something, or my dad had it, or whatever, therefore I too must get it. Right? All those levels and ways in which we are conditioned, we condition our experience, and that it then plays out in the body. Right? Well, our current new science and new medicine is telling us exactly the same thing. Mm-hmm. And of course, then he was leveled with, well, you're telling people it's just in their imagination, it's just in their mind, and it's not real. No. He understood that the physical experience was real, but the cause was actually something that could be uprooted from a mental and spiritual point of view. And so he began doing that. He began working with that. And then people were like, how do you do that? Well, he began writing and exploring and trying to give language to it. If you read some of the material, you can clearly see that he's in a very old-fashioned science. So some of the science just doesn't wash, doesn't make sense. And yet he had all these documented healings. And in one of the articles that he himself wrote, kind of defending what he was doing, he said, oh yeah, sometimes, if it's something on a leg, I might rub the leg, and sometimes I rub the person's head. And he says, it's not because I'm doing anything. It's I'm not passing energy. I'm not the healer. I'm not doing anything, but it makes the other person feel like something's happening. So I do it anyway. In the meantime, what I'm doing is telling them the truth. I'm telling them the truth about themselves. I'm arguing with the false belief until the false belief is cut out. And it is in the argument that cuts out the false belief that the healing happens. He says the thought is the cure. And it's not the thought, oh, I'm healthy. It's the thought about the nature of reality that is the cure, which is very different than sort of our, affirmations, I'm healthy, I'm healthy, I'm healthy. It goes way beyond that. So that whole, and all of that whole, he did it all by himself while being vilified in the newspaper and laughed at. And, it's really amazing.
It's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible. When I read about him and learn about him, I can visualize this person that's putting himself in as the experimenter, almost the scientific experimenter, throughout the whole journey of his life. And he went through these stages of mesmerism, and then understanding, oh, actually, I don't need this mesmerism thing. I can do this intuitively. And then ultimately, though, he did come to the idea of Christ consciousness.
Yes.
at the end, when he realized that it really is just coming through me.
Yes, that he was actually tapping into the actual nature of reality. And he believed that was Jesus's mission. Jesus's mission was to heal, and that he was teaching us that it is that that understanding of our oneness with spiritual or causal reality. He uses the term causal nature, right, is the Christ consciousness, and that Jesus was evidencing that in his healings, and that we ourselves could do that. But it isn't mystical in the sense of being otherworldly, or in the sense of being from God per se, right? It is simply the nature of reality. And I loved what you said, Laura. He saw himself as a scientist, as an experimenter, and he was going to, by God, prove this, that what Jesus was doing was in fact duplicatable. But you have to really, really divorce yourself from the idea that disease is inevitable. You have to divorce yourself from the idea that disease is a real permanent reality of the human condition. And that's what people would get so mad about, because they would say, well, but I've had this, since I was born, or I've had this chronic, forever. And and I've been to every doctor. And what do you mean it's not real? Well, it's not that it's not real. It's not that it's not real. You are actually having that. You have that lump, or you have that thing. But disease itself does not, it's not part of that one life that is actually the life. And that is where that Christ consciousness comes in, the realization of that.
So he was, I know Reverend Kathy has a question here. I just wanted to add this in, though, that he was ultimately paving the way to change race consciousness or mass consciousness for doctors, for the medical, because he was coming away from this idea that the doctor is the one that does the healing. And the doctor ultimately is the one that can say, oh, you're going to survive or you're not going to survive. So he was giving people the knowing of their own power.
Yes. And in addition to that, that the germ in and of itself is not the cause, or the chronic whatever fatigue or whatever it is actually not the cause. The cause is a belief that this is even possible, that this experience is something that human people have, and therefore now that I have it, it's inevitable that I'm sick. I mean, to really bend our minds around how radical it is. I mean, in that sense, he was a precursor to the quantum field, the idea of the quantum field, and that, the particles are real, yes, but they are momentary expressions of the field that is the fabric of the universe, and they come into existence and then they wink out again. Well, what makes them wink into existence again? Something. And what makes them wink into existence in the exact same way, which is a disease, as opposed to back into original wholeness. And I mean, he was such a front runner in all of that, even though his science was completely, he was talking about humors and things that we would know today, the ether and whatever that we would know today was their first attempts at, making some description of what was going on. And and so not only not giving all your power away for the doctor, but also it's a radical thing to realize I'm not sick because I have a germ. Actually, I have a germ because there's something within my consciousness that allowed that germ to find a place in my life and to become an illness. That's actually the cause. That's and that's why they would get so mad at him.
Wow.
Right. And I was
of course they were.
Right. And to know that he was alive from 1802 to 1866. So this is all happening in that time frame really is epic, for the evolution of mind healing.
Yeah. And it's so early in that, right?
Right.
And, we know about mind healing or spiritual healing from all kinds of spiritual traditions, but he was trying to figure out and articulate, well, how does it work? And does it just, because even in like a traditional indigenous, I mean, they had spiritual healings. Well, does it always have to be the shaman who prays over us? Or in a, Christian revival tent? Is it actually the priest, or the guy who goes, be healed, right? I mean, he was really trying to explore and understand that and make that available to people. And so his prescriptions, part of what we have in terms of his writings, were some of it's him trying to explain it, but some of it's also like his prescription for people. What he would write: here's what I think is going on with you. Here's what I understand is some of the cause. So here's what you need to be working on in your mind. Here's what you need to be thinking about. Like literally, the prescription was understand reality different. Like, is that just wild?
I'm just having this kind of like, oh my gosh. So he was really separating out I'm going to talk in his language, the physician from the germ, from the patient. He was separating the three of them, whereas somebody that had something that they think was wrong with them would have clumped all of that together in their mind.
Yes. And owned it.
Yeah.
Well, this is real. And owned it like it's inevitable, like it's somehow, yeah, I don't know how to say that. I mean, it's just is what is in terms of the human condition. And yet, his friends called him Park, although his patients called him Dr. Quimby. He had no education, no formal education. He did not receive any kind of college education, but people were healed. And so they called him that. He was really trying to help people separate those things out and get to that fundamental causal place that is just really, it's really different. It's a really different mindset. And it is the beginning of alternative medicine, new thought, all of new thought, recognizing causal reality. And of course, it does go back to the ancient mystery schools, and it does go back to the teachings of Jesus. So in that sense, it's not new, but it's having that new thought around whatever is going on, that changes everything. Mm-hmm. And so he wanted to create the science of truth. That's what he thought he was doing. The science of truth. So not like some divine revelation, not like, oh, I'm going to sit in the oneness and I'm going to be healed. No, the truth, which is that there's a causal reality that creates all of this, and that and that we can have a science of that, as opposed to some religious experience of it. Which I thought was really, and he said he wasn't going to really publish, he wasn't going to write a book until he had developed it. So it was really interesting in reading some of the bios and reminding myself of all of this, that his son and two women were healed, two women that were healed, two sisters, the Ware sisters, and then his son all kind of became his secretaries. They would be his copyists. They would, they wanted to gather some of these in pieces. And now I can't remember who it is who wrote about this, but basically, I think it was his son. I think so. Wrote about his last years, and that he had so committed himself to the relieving of human suffering, that he had given his whole, opened himself to the sensitivity of being able to intuit and feel what was going on with them, and intuit what was happening in their subconscious mind, that he had given so much And, he let people decide what they were going to pay him. He didn't really care that he basically wore himself out. And 5 years before he died, he went back to Belfast and basically went to bed and didn't get out again. That he had just spent his life force. That's an extraordinary thing.
12,000 people, one at a time, coming to be in front of him and be healed. I can't imagine who that wouldn't exhaust.
And not necessarily just coming once, right? They had to come over and over and over again, because it was their shift in consciousness that ultimately created the healing. When they really started to pay attention and really started to listen and engage and that's when the healing occurred. So they came not just once, but over and over. And then he literally did battle with their thinking. So 12,000 people doing that. I mean, that's exhausting to think about. And what a love, what a powerful desire to eliminate suffering. It's really mind-boggling. Which is why he didn't write anything, which is why we have the manuscripts, right?
He didn't have time.
Well, and he never really felt like he had fully articulated it, I think, too. I think he was still trying to keep, finding ways to talk about it that maybe were that were understandable and people could really grasp. That was the big thing, that how difficult it was for people to really grasp what he was talking about.
And so I might be jumping a little bit with our questions, but so the archives does have the Quimby manuscripts on our website. But what would you recommend for someone who is really is so curious from this conversation and wants to delve in deeper? What writings of Quimby would you recommend?
The Quimby manuscripts are a great place to start. You just have to remember that it's a little bit like reading, I don't know, a translation of the Bhagavad Gita. There's a lot of old language, old science, and you really have to find your way through and try to imagine what it is that he's trying to engage in. The Quimby manuscripts themselves are edited, and they are there's been some work done on them by his heirs. I don't know how much his son or further down the line. There's a new book out, I don't know, in the last 5 or 10 years, the complete writings, unedited, unabridged, complete writings of Quimby. And it has a lot of great information about Quimby. It has a lot of his letters. It has a lot of his writings in it. I find it very difficult to navigate because of the way they have organized the material. I didn't find the way that they organized the material really all that helpful. So, but you do have to know that the Quimby manuscripts themselves, they have been edited. And so they are not actually, in every case, his actual writing. I mean, maybe, I don't know, 20%, 25%. I don't know how much. But the claim is that the Phineas Parkhurst Quimby resource group, that they have gone back to the original documents. And so those documents, the original documents, are held either in the Library of Congress. Most of it's in the Library of Congress, and then the rest of it's at the University of Boston. And the Quimby family still has some. As I said, Quimby himself, he kept writing to people. He wrote articles. He tried to just explain it. He would write it, but he never actually sat down and wrote a book. It's dense material, but it's always interesting to go back to the actual texts themselves and try to make sense of it for yourself.
That's true. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes. I'd like to acknowledge everyone that's here and viewing us right now. Welcome in. We're with Dr. Reverend Petra Weldes and Reverend Kathy Mastroianni from the Executive Director of Science of Mind Archives, and we're here on New Thought Media Network, and we're having an incredible conversation about the one of the founders, or the founder of New Thought, Phineas Parkhurst Quimby. And Dr. Petra is sharing her wisdom and her knowledge because she has researched him for many, many years and has looked into his life and takes people on amazing tours. That's just incredible. Back to New England to know more about his life as he was developing his healing technique. I have a question about the placebo effect and Phineas Quimby and the placebo effect, and what he would have thought about the placebo effect now, if his healing, his healing or his findings were, really because he knew that in him, and that's why it was happening for the other. Do you think that he would have been thinking about it along those lines also?
Well, I wouldn't say that he knew it in himself and therefore that's what was happening to his patient. So let me just read something to you in his own words. Quimby talks about himself being a sensitive and an intuitive. He could feel others' pain and he could identify their false beliefs. But what he writes about the patient, he says this: the case of the patient is different. He knows not what the feelings are. He cannot escape from them, neither can he destroy them. He is looking outside of himself for the cause of his trouble when it is in his belief, to which fact he does not know. Now he can be cured by being more aware of the cause of his trouble, which is done by reasoning and illustrations applicable to his particular case. And when he, the patient, is convinced as to the truth of the reasoning, then he is cured and the great battle won, though there may still be some guerrilla fighting for a while. Right, so Quimby was very clear that he was not a healer. It wasn't because he could feel it and sense it and was doing something. His job was to help the patient see what he had intuited about the patient. And so you ask a really interesting question, Laura. Perhaps half of his healings were from the placebo effect. Who knows? Perhaps he so completely convinced his patient that the cause was not purely the germ or the malady, but was actually the fact that some deep false belief had been bought into, and that was now manifesting in the patient's body. If he could get the patient to believe that, well, whether that's true or not doesn't really matter, does it? That's what the placebo effect says.
Effect is.
So did he actually pinpoint every time, always, the exact reason why that person was having that, chronic illness? I would not want to argue, 100% yes or 100% no, exactly because of the placebo effect. But what matters is that people bought into the belief that was being presented and they were healed, which tells us where the healing comes from, right? It comes from the belief, which means it doesn't, and it doesn't matter if you don't have a malady, but think of people that we know that don't actually have a malady, but they create all kinds of symptoms in their bodies because they believe they're sick, which is what, I think it's Joe Dispenza calls the Nebo effect.
Yes.
And it's the negative effect.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he was uncovering that also. In a way, he was he may have been using that for himself. We'll never know.
Well, and I'm sure that's part of why, his patients would argue with him. And as long as they were arguing, they might be getting incrementally better, but they weren't getting really better until there was that complete shift. Right. So I love this. This is from his son. I thought this was really great, too. This is his son trying to talk about the actual teaching, right? The actual thing, that the science of truth. Man is made up of truth, errors, beliefs, opinions, and is governed by that which has the strongest foothold in him. And that disease is the effect of a belief, the phenomena being visible in the body while the cause is located in the mind. Man is to himself just what he thinks he is, and that things are to him just what he thinks they are. Consequently, and he's refuting, like, well, what are you saying? My illness is all in my imagination? No. Consequently, there can be no such thing as imagination. The cure is made by removing the cause of the disease, which is done by reasoning and explaining to the patient how he is affected by his belief, and that outside of the belief, there is no such thing as disease. Right. And so, it's really interesting. I mean, that's straight, what became Christian Science. Mary Baker Eddy picked that up.
Yes.
And, we can give a nod to the big controversy that they took Warren Felt Evans and the Dressers took Mary Baker Eddy to court for using the term Christian Science and claiming that she had coined it, and that Phineas Parkhurst Quimby had, in fact, used it first. And, yada, 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 yada. Really,
yeah.
I'm not sure it really matters one way or the other, but I mean, you can see in Christian Science, right? There's no reality to sin, sickness, and death. There's no eternal, infinite reality to those things. They are experiences that we have in the human condition, but they're all caused by something, and that causes in thought and in mind. And that's like, and the more fact-based we become in our science, the more we insist on facts, the harder it is for people to imagine that could possibly be true, which is, of course,
right.
why so much alternative medicine and spiritual healing is considered woo-woo and out there, and, and it's all in it's that same leveling of, well, what are you telling me? It's all in my mind, not really understanding the causal nature of reality. Phineas talked about, of course, the pain is real, illness is real, but disease is a misunderstanding of thinking. I love that. It's just a misunderstanding of our thinking. It's not.
Yes.
That seems like.
I love that.
Right? Doesn't that feel like something you could actually do something about? It's just a misunderstanding.
Yes.
I love it too. Yes.
It's that simple.
Right. Yeah. So he talks about, he denies disease as a truth, admits that it is a deception without any foundation, handed down from generation to generation till people believe it, and it's become a part of their lives. Right? Isn't that amazing? There's no intelligence, power, or actor in matter itself. Right? Because disease is just matter. There's no cause in matter. There's no, right? It's outpicturing life. Matter is outpicturing life. The cause comes from life, not from the matter itself.
So he wasn't, in fact, asking people to have a religious experience or to have a spiritual experience.
No.
And that's what made it easier for people to hear him.
Well, I don't know. I think if you look at all the spiritualists and all the this was also in the heyday of spiritualism. I'm not sure that's true. I mean, I think that's why so many of his secretaries talked about how difficult his patients found it. because I think sometimes it's easier to heal. Well, God will take care of it. Just believe in God and you'll be fine, and God will take care of it. What do you mean? It's in my mind. I have to do that work. I have to believe that. So I don't know, Laura. I don't know whether that made it easier for people to, or whether it was just, it's just such a different way of engaging without the need for some dramatic, road to Damascus kind of experience. That really ordinary people, ordinary people can have the experience of healing. It is about truth,
right?
Not about religion. It's about truth.
I think that's what I meant. That it made it easier because he wasn't asking people to change anything about the way they believed in God.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah.
It could be.
And I love that you called it the science of truth.
He called it that.
He called it that, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you said that he called it that. But yes, that's very powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And to take it out of the realm of mystery, or out of the realm of superstition, or even out of the realm of emotionalism. I mean, that is so prevalent as the roots of New Thought. I mean, all the way through to Science of Mind. Ernest Holmes talks about that so much of the science of mind is in refutation of the sentimentality of religion. And this idea that we have to feel the spirit and be overcome with the spirit, and somehow, right, and that it is actually something we can learn and understand and apply, and therefore it's available to everybody. And I mean, it's so interesting. It's so interesting. Quimby, Emerson, Ernest Holmes, Emma Curtis Hopkins, Mary Baker Eddy, where did they all come from? New England.
Yes.
Very independent minded, very practical, very, right, very, not all the, I don't know. I mean, we're stereotyping here in some big way, of course. So, we have to be really cognizant of that. But when you think about tent revivals, right, I think of how many of them actually took place. And they're all about whipping up the emotion and having this spirit. And, it's an entirely different thing. And, they didn't really happen a whole lot in New England. They kind of happened in the South, and they happened in the West, but they didn't happen a whole lot in New England. Right. And so, so that's also an interesting, it's just that whole different sensibility to grab a hold of truth in a different way. And that has followed through in New Thought. If you will understand the nature of reality, and you will understand the cause of the pattern in your life, you can heal and change it. Our shorthand is change your thinking, change your life. Well, it's actually change your belief, change your life, which really means change the cause, which you've picked up as a belief, change your life, right? But the shorthand is change your thinking, change your life. And I mean, it's just so interesting how that grew out of that New England mentality.
And I love that. And thank you so much. And I don't mean to totally interrupt, but it just seemed like our last question, because we're getting to the last 10 minutes here.
Okay.
And it would be great to, I think what you said might have summarized it really well, but how can this teaching, how is it practical for our viewers here? So what would you take from Quimby's teaching that people right here and right now can use in their lives?
Well, the way that I would state it is our bodies are truly an outpicturing and a metaphor of what we believe life to be. And we know from psychology, we know from medicine that thoughts and feelings, one hand, get stored in our bodies, and on the other hand, have an incredible impact. It is unequivocally been researched, the mind-body connection. And when mind, that doesn't mean just intellectual mind. That means mind, emotion, psyche, subconscious, right? The impact that has on the body. And there is no question, as simple as starting with lifestyle and stress. Wow. If we can find a new way to handle our stress in our psyche, emotionally and physically, emotionally and mentally, if we can stop obsessing about how everything is not good enough, how we're not good enough, if we can stop feeling alienated and isolated, find our connections, if we can find new ways to handle our stress, what we're doing is we're putting new causes in motion. We're setting up a literally, we're building new synaptic pathways in our brain, and our body must follow. Now, that's like the most basic, simple thing. And then from there, we begin to push the boundaries of it and just go to all of the amazing documented, researched evidence of people going into remission and having these extraordinary healing experiences. So 90% of them have they have an unshakable positive expectation about life. They have decided to do something to be well. They've used their minds or their consciousness in some form or fashion that is identifiable to either imagine that the cancer is getting nibbled away or to affirm their wholeness or whatever it is. I mean, over and over and over again. Ultimately, right, we're still in the level of working with the condition. Ultimately, that if that's true, what would it be like if we really believe that the cause of our life was our understanding that we are the one, the infinite life, the infinite power and presence, individualized as us. If that's the cause of our lives and the qualities of wholeness and love and joy and peace are available to us, then if we make that the cause, then our life, including our physical bodies, that's what they're going to align with. That's what our bodies are going to align with. And so the practical application starts with those fundamental beliefs that we have. It's the flu season. Oh my God, it's the pandemic. Well, I just know I'm going to get COVID. All these ways in which we engage with this. My mother had arthritis, so I guess I'm going to have arthritis. Or I'm going to be so resistant to it that all I think about is not getting arthritis, or all the ways in which we buy into these things. I mean, I can't tell you how many people that I have worked with, and they come to me and they say they found a lump. I have to go back wherever the lump is. I have to go back. I mean, we say, no. We say immediately, we start with, there is no spiritual necessity for this lump. The divine pattern of wholeness is the causal reality of a human body, and of every cell in that body, every organ in that body. There is a pattern for the heart and the lungs and wherever the lump might be. And we say no to that there's no necessity for this to be evidencing itself in physicality. And the cause we're restoring is the cause of wholeness. And 99.9% of the time, people come back to me and say, the doctors really don't know what to say, but wow, they can't find it anymore. They don't know where it is. We don't know what happened. Yeah, because we sent it back to the native nothingness from which it came. Because it has no cause of its own. Now, eventually you have to do the work. What outpictured that? So we don't attract it again. I do know people that have attracted it over and over and over again, because then they don't actually work with those fundamental beliefs that are back there that the body is outpicturing. They don't change the lifestyle or the stress or the negative thinking or the belief that, something bad is going to happen. And so that's the work. And it's powerful. I've seen people themselves of, I've been a part of people healing themselves of massive heart attacks and, all kinds of things. And I've worked with people and they still died. And so, it's not 100% guarantee by any means, but neither is any medicine. It is the opportunity to participate in our own healing, right? And not just hand it over to, an outer authority, or to say, well, this is just the way life is. This is just the way, my family is. This is just how I am, and I can't do anything about it. I mean, that to me is the epitome of suffering. This at least gives something for us to do as well. Now, I'm a big proponent in alternative medicine. I'm a huge proponent of Western medicine. Western medicine has its place in a crisis. It's brilliant. I would be dead if it weren't for Western medicine, and so would my son. We would have both died in childbirth. Thank God. Right? So this is not about abandoning the Western medicine or the alternative medicine. It's adding this piece to it. Why not work at all levels? Causal level, mental, emotional level. For God's sakes, we all need to go to therapy. Let's all be in therapy. Get rid of all that crap that's back there to the best of our ability. Give our bodies a healthy regime and a healthy way of being, and then really engage in that causal thinking, right? It's the whole piece of it. Thus endeth my sermon about that.
Wow. And I'd just like to add one little piece on there, onto this, as you're saying all of this. I don't know, Rev Kathy, if this is how you feel. It's almost as if Quimby has laid this foundation and he's done this groundwork, real groundwork. And then along comes Ernest Holmes, and now we have the articulation of this, of how we can use this for our own lives. Through the text and through the teachings of Ernest Holmes, whereas with Quimby it was really about this him trying to find it out, and Ernest Holmes has written it out for us all as a kind of a roadmap here. It's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing today.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me. I love it. I think it's fabulous. And of course, every time we go into these topics, we just go a little deeper. What more can we understand? So I'm thrilled to be here with you guys, and I'm so grateful that you're doing this program.
Thank you. So are we. And so for people to learn more, so I have here your website for csldallas.org, but you also talked about your spirit tours. Where would people find out about those? Would it be?
Well, we work with a company called Spirit Tours, spirittours.com. It's literally spirittours.com. And it comes out of Dr. Edward Viljoen's work in Santa Rosa. We've gone to all kinds of places. We've gone to Bali. We've gone to New Zealand with them. And they invited me, or I talked them into letting me create a tour, Roots of New Thought to New England. So I periodically work with them, and we do the Roots of New Thought to New England, and we study Quimby, Emerson. We go to Belfast, Maine. There is a Quimby clock in the bell tower. It's one of the only clocks of his work. And we study Quimby and Emerson, Thoreau, Emma Curtis Hopkins, Mary Baker Eddy, and we every day we see something go somewhere, and we do the lineage. It's fabulous. And of course we do it in the fall, so we have the fall colors, and we eat lobster, which is really fabulous.
Can we have a virtual tour next time?
I know, right? Let's do it. So so we go every 3 years or so. Jim and I, we do another one, and we say, okay, but it's been a while now because COVID took 2 years just right out. So, but you can do a lot of lovely traveling with Spirit Tours. We have a group going to Africa, actually next week, South Africa, and we're going to go to Ireland with them. We've been all over the world with them. But I was really, I loved it that they wanted to let me create this tour and then lead it. So Beautiful. Who knows if we'll get to do it again soon.
Wow. Yes, let's affirm that. Thank you so much for coming here and being so present and sharing from your heart. And I know that you're going to be coming back as well to talk about Emerson in a couple of months' time, which will also be exciting.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We're so grateful.
Thank you, Dr. Petra. And thank you for everybody that's been here viewing in real time. Some really beautiful comments that have been coming through, and stay tuned in with this series of Wisdom of the Mystics. Who do we have next time, Reverend Kathy?
We have Emma Curtis Hopkins, presented by Dr. Ruth Miller. And so that's really exciting.
Yay.
Yes, that will be on March 15th.
Every 2 weeks we're here with our super guest. And Dr. Petra today has been such a joy. It's amazing to understand Phineas Parkhurst Quimby in this way, in this depth, and to get to know him and these challenges and what he created and has left as a trademark, really, for New Thought. Wow. Thank you, Phineas.
Yes, really, really.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you also to New Thought Media Network, this incredible ministry that is doing so many beautiful things every day to bring programming like this to you, to your heart, to your mind, so that you can get that closeness within you, get closer to that divinity within you. There's the website, New Thought Media Network. We have a donate button, so feel free to share your love offerings and donations, knowing that God is our source. This is what we do. We tithe. We remain in the flow of receptivity here. And until next time, we will leave you with a big goodbye and a big thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Petra.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.